6 months ago, on International Human Rights Day, December 10th, the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights released a landmark report documenting the massive repression of human rights in Iran and calling for the sanctioning of the major architects of that repression, those responsible for the arrest, the imprisonment, the torture, and the murder of leaders of all levels of civil society in Iran. We identified some 10 different civil society groups, journalists, scientists, students, trade union workers, lawyers, human rights defenders, and the like. I can go on, ethnic and religious minority leaders, all of whom were subjected and targeted as part of this massive domestic repression. And as I said in a press conference that we had then at the time, that 2018 has witnessed an almost unprecedented assault on human rights in Iran, what Amnesty International called the year of shame, which took place amidst an ongoing culture of impunity. It was the international community's indifference and inaction, and this bears reminder at this point, it was the international community's indifference and inaction re Saudi Arabian human rights violations, which emboldened the Saudi Arabian leadership that took it down the road to then brutal murder of Jamal Khashoggi. In a word, inaction regarding Iranian leaders who are engaged in the multiple murders, torture, and imprisonment is now emboldening the architects of repression in Iran who must be held to account. 6 months later, after I made that statement and we meet here, the assault on human rights in Iran has been relentless and has only intensified amidst the reigning culture of impunity in Iran. And this includes, we'll hear much more about this given the expert witness testimony that we have, this is the most compelling set of witnesses that we have had for any forum under any of the Iran Accountability Weeks. Several testified before the Foreign Affairs Public Committee this morning, and the response really from the Foreign Affairs Committee was unlike that which I've ever seen in terms of the manner in which it was greeted with applause in terms of the witness testimony, speaking out of the, in effect, pain of their own personal experience as former political prisoners and leaders of human rights in Iran. And what we're witnessing today, and with this I close, we are witnessing a sustained assault on women's rights in Iran, the mocking abuse of hostage diplomacy regarding imprisoned dual nationals, of which there are several Canadian dual nationals implicated in that regard. The Kafkaesque conversion of environmental protection in Iran, which is sorely needed, into a capital crime, such that as we meet, 8 environmentalists are on trial in Iran and have been devoid of any semblance of any due process in that trial. The continuing arrests days ago of students, workers, journalists, women, human rights defenders. And I'll close with this, the outrageous, there's no other word, and even that's an understatement in terms of what it is, the outrageous conviction and sentencing of Nasrin Sotoudeh, the iconic human rights lawyer in Iran, who has gone down the line for other human rights defenders, for students, for children on the risk of juvenile execution, for other women and the like. She has been sentenced, and this is since we spoke last met in December, sentenced to 38 years in prison and 148 lashes. For a woman in her mid-50s, this is a virtual death sentence for doing nothing other than standing up for human rights in Iran and calling on Iran to abide by its own international commitments. And what is incredibly outrageous is that 2 days after this happened, Iran was elected to the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women. And so the absurdity at this point of a relentless assault on human rights in Iran and the community of democracies who have not yet effectively mobilized to hold Iran to account. Fortunately, we have, as I said, a very compelling panel, and the panel will be moderated by Ketty Nivyabandi. She herself has been a most eloquent and compelling advocate for human rights and women's rights in Burundi and beyond. She's representing the Nobel Women's Group here today, and she will be the moderator for the panel, introducing the panelists, and I'm delighted to turn it over to you, Ketty, now.
Thank you so much, Honorable Kotler. We're so grateful for your powerful voice for justice, your relentless and truly outstanding voice for justice, not just in Canada, but around the world. And so, as you rightly mentioned, I work with an initiative, and one of our board members is, of course, Badi, who spoke before the Foreign Affairs Committee this morning, and so the cause of Iran is the one that's very close to our hearts. And so I come here with the greetings and the solidarity of all our laureate sisters and our organization as a whole. I think that as you've clearly outlined it, the human rights crisis in Iran is very much a gendered one, and we'll really touch on this aspect in this panel. We hope to really be able to unpack this. So the way we'll do this is we'll give each of the panelists a few minutes to express themselves and share their perspectives on what is happening, and I'll introduce each one of them as they come forward. I just want to highlight that unfortunately one of them has a meeting right after this and will have to leave us, but we'll stay with the other panelists. And so I'll then begin with you, of course, Masih Alinejad, who is a very renowned Iranian journalist, an author, a human rights activist, and the founder of the now trending White Wednesdays campaign for women's freedom in Iran. Recently, she won the Geneva Summit for Human Rights Award for giving a voice to the voiceless and stirring the conscience of humanity to support the struggle of Iranian women for basic human rights, freedom, and equality. Masih, you're very welcome to Canada.
Thank you so much.
And I'd like to perhaps start with maybe before you tell us about the White Wednesdays campaign, could you, not everyone knows, I'm sure many of those who are in the room know, but not everyone knows that the repression against women has not always been the case. Prior to the 1979 revolution, women in Iran were some of the most emancipated around the world. And I wonder if you could just give us that background. Sure. And then lead us into your fight, your struggle today around compulsory hijab.
Sure. Hi everyone. Salam. به ایرانیای عزیزی که زحمت کشیدین اومدین. دیدن صورت تک تکتون به من قوت قلب و انرژی میده. Sorry, I had to say something in Persian because I haven't seen my family for 10 years. So every individual person here who comes from Iran and their face is familiar for me. To me, it's like my family. Thank you so much.
You are our family too.
Thank you. Together we are stronger. As you mentioned, before the revolution in Iran, women had the right to choose what they wanted to wear. We had female judges. We had female ministers. Women were allowed to participate to any kind of sports. Women were allowed to enter stadiums. So basic, no? Women had freedom to choose their own lifestyle. So I always ask people, including my parents, who helped, to overthrow the regime, that why? What you were looking for? I asked the reformists, the group that I've been working for them as a journalist for years and years in Iran, and had hope. So why? What was the reason that we had revolution? So the answer is different. From my family, they said that we were looking for better opportunity to live, equality of earning money, finding job. For the politicians, they were saying that we were looking for political freedom. So let me be clear with you. We lost all the social freedom that we already had. We didn't gain any political freedom. And right now in Iran, workers, teachers, miners, those actually help, the Islamists to overthrow the regime. Right now, they are asking for better opportunity to live. They are the one protesting against the Islamic regime because they haven't been paid their salaries for month and month. They have, the courage to take to the street and say that they are lying to us. Our enemy is not America. Our enemy is here, is the Islamic Republic of Iran. So that is why I always say that the revolution became a revolution against women. The government, when they took the power, the Islamists, they took our body hostage. So they wrote their own ideology on the backs of women. We were the one that we have to carry the most visible symbol of oppression with us. We were the one, actually, we had to carry the visible of the Islamic Republic with us. The only way that you understand, when you entered my beautiful country, you understand this is Islamic country. Tell me how? Through us, through the women. When you enter to a family and you understand, to a country and you understand this country is run by the Islamists, through us. So I strongly believe that if we want to challenge this oppressive regime, the government, then every individual woman has to launch her own revolution, because the revolution was a revolution against women. So this is what I did from my family's house. So I always share my personal story. While I grew up in a small, tiny village, I was not always looking like that. Yeah, I had to cover this whole big hair. I never had a clue about feminism, equality, never had a clue about discrimination, never. But I had a little brother, was the most visible example of freedom, all the freedom that I wanted to have. I wanted to sing, was forbidden. I wanted to dance, was forbidden. I wanted to go out and ride a bicycle, banned from women. Everything was forbidden. My body was like a sin. I was the one actually, all the blames goes on me. If there's rape here in Iran, it's my fault because I don't cover myself. So my brother was an example, and I wanted to have the same freedom, and I started to fight first against my brother. That is why we have to do in Iran, because right now we have a stadium in Iran, men enter to the stadium, 100 men. 100? Yeah, stadium 100,000 pesari, you're right. 100,000 men go to a stadium. Women are banned for 40 years. Can you believe that? So what I did about White Wednesdays movement, it was this. I said that I just started my revolution from my family's kitchen. The sink was very low for men, because men are for women, because men are, in my family, men were, women were shorter than men. I was shorter than my brother. My mom was shorter than my father, but we were both, me and my mother, working very hard in the garden as well, in farm as well. But when it comes to the, washing dishes, cooking, it was our responsibility. And I found a chair, and I said to my brother, look, there is a chair. I know this is not easy for you, but there is a chair. Sit down and wash the dishes. This is how I gained my freedom. And he was the one allowed to go to the backyard, outside and play with boys, but I was not. So, my mother was a true feminist and teacher for me, because she's not even able to read and write. She said to me that, we were very poor. We didn't have inside bathroom. So we had to use the outhouse, which was in the backyard garden, dark during the night, blacker than black, if such a thing is possible. My mom used to tell me, if you're scared of the darkness, then the darkness can devour you, can swallow you all. But if you open your eyes as wide as you can, stare into the darkness, then the darkness will disappear. As a kid, I thought this is a fact. So I used to go to outhouse and open my eyes as wide as I could. And it worked. It worked. So, and I said to myself, yeah, that's it. I experienced a lot of darkness in my life, and I learned how to defeat the darkness. So I shared my personal story. That was not a plan at all. Trump was not behind me. Believe me, MI6 was not behind me. Intelligence said not at all. It was just a personal story. I shared my story, and I said, this is my life. Share your story. I invited all women like Shaparak, ordinary women, be your own storytellers. Be your own voices. Don't wait for someone to come and save you. Be your own savior. Don't wait for a leader. Be your own leader. That scares the government. So I shared my pictures. It went viral, and women got the courage to share their own stories with me. Right now, it's the most prominent civil disobedience movement in Iran. Today, when we were talking to the member of the parliament, some of the government, foreign minister, from foreign minister officers. So all the story was very sad. We were sharing a lot of tragic story, beyond sad. But believe me, when it comes to women, it's pain and power. And I was like proud to represent these brave women of Iran who occupied more than 60% of university. But these are the women are counted second-class citizen in Iran. So this is the movement, and I want to say the last part of my presentation and leave you alone. So when I grew up in my village, we had black and white TV. And I was the one always watching the clerics. All the Iranians know that. همه کانالا فقط آخونده نشون میداد. هر کانالی رو که میزدی. All the news channel was just clerics talking about us, talking about what kind of lifestyle we have to follow, how cropped women, if they take off their headscarf, or if they dance, or if they sing. So I was the one watching them. But right now, these are the clerics watching me and millions of other women. And they all know me by my name. But believe me, they have different names for me. They call me a prostitute. They call me a whore. They call me agent of MI6. They called me agent of CIA. They even called me agent of Trump. And they call me ugly duckling. They don't know the end of the story of ugly duckling. So this is all to patronize you, to humiliate you, to attack you and to keep you silent. But I want to say that as far as every individual woman share their story, take their visibility back, be their own storytellers, they cannot keep us silent. Now there is a new initiative on the campaign, not just White Wednesdays. Every day is Wednesdays for Iranian women who are fighting for freedom. Not is just the hijab issue. It went beyond that. Hijab is just the genetic code of the Islamic Republic. It's the main pillar of the Islamic Republic. If you bring this wall down, then the rest will get easier. This is just the beginning for the women in Iran. This is just the first step toward full equality. One example. One of the women took a video of herself walking unveiled, practicing her civil disobedience, and filming the morality police. This is under new initiative called My Camera is My Weapon. So women were walking unveiled and filming any harassers. This is our kind of Me Too movement, our version of Me Too movement. Because if we being harassed, we cannot go to judiciary system, the blame goes on us. So we used our camera by we, the women inside Iran. One of the video got 9 million views. A woman, before that it was morality police chasing women. Now it's women chasing morality police, telling that this is none of your business. What did you say? Say that here. This is amazing. This is the true face of Iranian people who are fighting within the society. Here in Canada, we were not begging them to come and save us. We wanted to save them from their misunderstanding of our culture. We wanted to educate them that when people in Iran are fighting for freedom, and when there is no free election, when there is no freedom of choice, when there is no free press, when there is no political freedom, when there is no freedom for practice their own religion, when there is no freedom even to choose your own lifestyle, when they kill more than 100 people during the stolen election protest, when they arrest 29 women of White Wednesday's movement only in one day, when they arrest and warn 3.6 million women just because of not wearing inappropriate hijab, then it's your responsibility to sanction all those oppressors and ban their relatives to come here and have their safe shelter in Canada. Sanction all those oppressors and their relatives. When we see them stealing the money of the people and live here safe in Canada, but human rights activists go to jail or taking hostage like Nazanin, then this is your responsibility. Thank you so much. I think that's enough, and I can go and leave you alone now.
You can go. Thank you, Masih. I think if anyone had any doubt as to how empowered Iranian women are, they are more than convinced.
Apologize. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. And Masih raised such critical points, you know, highlighting that the revolution in Iran has really been a revolution against women, and bringing out such a core feminist principle that the personal is political, really is political. I'm going to turn to you, Shaparak. Shaparak Shaghari-Ratcliffe, I hope I pronounced it correctly, was sentenced to 20 years in prison for leading women's rights protests. She was arrested 3 times in 1 year for removing her headscarf in public. She's a true warrior. She fled to Canada, where she's now living in exile, and she's been named by the BBC as one of 100 most inspiring and influential women around the world. She has become, and she is indeed, a leading voice for women's rights in Iran. Thank you, Shaparak, for being with us. I want to ask you, in 2018 alone, I was looking at an Amnesty International report that said that 118 women human rights defenders were arrested in 2018 alone. And of course, we have leading women activists who are still in detention today. This has been your experience. Could you share with us what that experience was like, what it was like to be a woman defending women's rights in Iran, and what it continues to be today?
Hello, thank you for giving me this opportunity to be here and talk to you about my experience, and also the experience of an Iranian woman in general. Yeah, I remember that day. After, it was like 8 months after the beginning of White Wednesday campaign, Vida Movahedi, in that time, we didn't know that girl. A woman went on a utility box and showed her objection against compulsory hijab by waving her white scarf, and it was like a performance. And we women who were active with White Wednesday campaign, and we were writing about it, sending videos, talking about it. We started we started protesting for hijab like Vida. And after Vida, Narges Hosseini went on that utility box, so it got very big in society. And in one week, it was like more than 100 women went out and in public, and they waved their headscarf like her. And in one day, I remember I was out in that day. I went, I guess, with another lady to a Iranian knows that place, to Tehran Pars, to do that. And I did it in front of a mosque. But in that day, in the afternoon, we found that about 28 women got arrested. And yeah, it was very sad. And during those days, I was very scared. But at the same time, I couldn't stop. And my husband begged me several times, please, you did your part. You took action. Now stop for the sake of our family. And I was like, and he's a great guy. He always supported me. And I was like, Ali Reza, I can't stop. it's the thing, I am done waiting. For 40 years, I was waiting for a savior. Iranian has been waiting for someone to take action and save them. But in some point, I was like, I'm done waiting. I'm done being inactive. I'm fed of being oppressed by the government. I have to do something. And White Wednesday actually gave me that platform. It was, at first, it was like, if you don't like this law, this discriminatory law, just wear white. I told myself, I can wear white. But then we started sending videos and pictures to the campaigner, to Masih. And you know, as an Iranian woman, I know some Iranian women are here. You have a lot to say. You have lots of stories to tell. And every week, I had a lot to say. And I just had 1 minute, because on Instagram, on her Instagram page, I could just talk for 1 minute. So 1 minute, one week, I would say something, and I was waiting for the other week. But Masih used to tell me, I cannot post your videos back to back. You have to wait for some months, some weeks. There are lots of other women who want to talk and tell their story. So I started, my social media pages were public, because I used to be an animal supporter, and I had some followers. So I started talking about my demands on my Instagram page. I started talking about the campaign, about the violations of human rights and violence against women, and about our demand for equality. So that's why I started being active. And the week that you mentioned, yeah, it was very scary, but I couldn't stop.
And maybe just before I move on, you're talking about the demands that you're making. So I know the White Wednesdays are focused on compulsory hijab, but of course, as Masih mentioned, it's so much more than the hijab, right? It's a symbol of the oppression of women in general. Yeah. I wonder if you could speak just briefly about how women's rights are violated in Iran, and specifically what the experience is like for an Iranian woman living in Iran today.
After revolution, Iranian women lost their rights in many aspects of their lives. For example, if you get divorced, you will lose the custody of your kid. If you cannot work or go to university or go abroad without the permission of the man figure in the family, without the permission of your husband. And there are lots of other things. You're banned. There's no law saying you cannot ride a bicycle or motorcycle, but you're banned from it, because the leader quoted, it's not appropriate for women to ride bicycles. So I grew up with all those rules. I was divorced once, and I went to the courtrooms, and I was humiliated in those courtrooms. I was telling the judges that my husband was violent sometime, and he was like, he asked me, what did you do to make him beat you up? And I was like, what are you saying? I'm a human being, and no one can beat me up. Because Iranian women, as Masih mentioned, most of Iranian women are educated, and they know their rights. They know that they are equal. As a person. So I knew my rights, but in that courtroom, I was like, what are you saying? I wanted to tell the judge, what are you saying? because for them, if you are going, if you're applying for divorce, it's a symbol that you're not a good woman. For them, it's like that. And as I told you, there are when you grow up in Iran, you face violence, you face inequality every day in your life. And one of the things that I was so angry, because when we are out, Iranian women always feel this shadow of fear on their shoulder. It's like someone, every time you're out, it's like someone is watching you, and you don't feel safe. Because at any corner, someone may get close and harass you because of the way you look. It's not just hijab. It can be your nail polish. It can be your makeup. It can be your high-heeled shoes. Everything. Just if you wear that. What do you call the better kind of hijab, the better form of hijab, chador, in that case, you're safe. Nobody would come to you. But in other cases, you are always harassed by morality police officers, or the fanatics, the leaders, followers, the Basiji people. So as women, every day we are facing violence, we are facing humiliation. And after I got arrested, I'm gonna tell you, this for women who get arrested, I guess it's much worse than men, because they try to break you by slut shaming you, by intimidate you in a sexual way. And it was very horrible. The second time I got arrested, they arrested my husband in the street. He was waiting for me outside the building, and they arrested him, and actually by force they brought him to the building. And I was hearing the officers' voices, and they were trying to break him by saying bad things about me. And when, as you know, months ago they arrested a young reporter, a student, Sepide Qolian. She went to film the labor protest, and they arrested her with some of the labor activists, and they got a forced confession from her. When she got released, she told media that I was tortured, and I was tortured mentally and physically, and they forced me to have that confession. And you know what happened? Iranian, I guess, heard the phone call. They threatened her to spread lies about her being involved with another man. And that's outrageous. And that's what they are doing to lots of activists and women inside prison.
Thank you, Shabarak. Thank you.
I prepared some good speech, but
no, this is good because you spoke from the heart, and that's what we need, and that's what moves mountains. So thank you for your bravery. And I know this is not easy to discuss, so thank you. But it sheds a light on the realities of women in Iran. I want to turn to Maryam Shafipour, who herself has also been a political prisoner, and she was a student leader. She was sentenced for 7 years in prison. She served 2 years, but she will be not sharing. I'm not going to ask you about your experience there. I want to instead ask you about those who are still in prison and those that you know or maybe in contact with, and mostly about those who inspire you to continue the struggle, because I think there's a thread of very, very powerful Iranian women's voices that we are hearing. There's a very strong thread that is passed on to you and that's carried on with the current generation, and a thread of resistance, really. You know, we're hearing a lot of oppression, but there is very active resistance. And I know that one of the people that you look up to is Nasrin Sotoudeh, who we've spoken about, who's a human rights lawyer and who we know has worked a lot with Shirin Ebadi. So I wonder if you can speak to us about those currently imprisoned and how that fuels your own fight and your struggle. And perhaps if you could also add, because we also want to move into practically what we can do and what message you have all brought to. I know you've all been meeting with foreign affairs officials and the people at the parliament as well. What specific message and what call to action do you want to leave us with?
Sure. 2 years ago, by support of Nobel Women Initiative and Amnesty International, we are on a campaign called sorry, called Free Nargis. It was a very good experience for me. And also, just few days ago, Nargis wrote me a letter about solitary confinement and asked me to run a campaign against it again. And I guess it's very useful, you know. On Shaparak, what she said, all the trials, all the courts are based on the confessions were taken in solitary confinement, and we should be against that. We should raise our voice against that. The other thing Nargis mentioned in her letter, it was about the condition all of us we have faced in prison. You know, about the illness we faced in prison. I just want to mention from her letter. She said many prisoners in solitary confinement have suffered from illness caused by horrific and inhuman condition. This illness may affect them for years, even after their release, and sometimes all their life. Many prisoners even have lost their lives in solitary confinement. The last person was Qaboos Sayed Emami. You know, we know him because he was Canadian-Iranian, and there are a lot of in Iran, in prison, in cells. Nobody even knows their name, and they are under torture. They are under pressure. What she mentioned in her letter exactly happened to me, and I'm still struggling with the illness I got in solitary confinement. What we mentioned in our meetings with Global Affairs, I suggested them to run a campaign and vote all women leaders like Nargis, like Nasrin, Atana. Each of those can be a symbol of movement, and Canada can bold them, and it will be really loud voice in support of women's right.
Thank you, Ketty, and thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be on this panel and to be part of Iran Accountability Week. Before I answer on Nazanin, actually, I just wanted to pick up the point about strong women in the cells. Many of you will know Nazanin's story. Nazanin was taken, was put in solitary confinement for about 9 months, then was transferred into the women's ward of Evin prison, where she met some amazing women. Really strong, kind, caring, nurturing women that put her back together. Obviously, I mean, as you said, Ketty, as Maryam alluded to, solitary is tough. There are all sorts of pressures from the interrogators to break you down, to make you sign sorts of things, to make you feel that you don't know the world that you knew before, and that everyone's against you, and that to keep pressuring you to come out of that and in baby steps to spend time with those women. I've been really struck. I mean, we talk about them being stand-tall women. The sort of idea of just the nurturing of making space to listen to each other and have cups of tea together, and just hear each other's stories. But also, I don't know if Maryam felt the same, that the importance for Nazanin of food and the fact that people will have meals and we'll cook together and we'll share to mark occasions, whether it's someone's anniversary. So our anniversary got celebrated and a meal was cooked and there was dancing, and that sort of reminder of what it is to be human, and that you have a human life outside, and that your cellmates know that you're human, cherish your human, keep you going. Really important. And a really important part of, I mean, Masih was talking about resistance in that sort of, outside prison battling, but actually just keeping alive the spirit of being human and remembering it's really important. And that's one of the things that I think outside solidarity always does. It's just the reminder that there is a world outside, that there's ordinary people that care and are lovely and kind, and in the midst of what is a sort of a tough situation for everyone that goes through being in prison, but also it's a tough situation for Iran, and also it's a besieged situation, and those perpetrating are also frightened and whatever else. But having that sureness that there is an outside and that people are in solidarity for the world can be different is really important. So thank you all for coming along and being part of that. To answer your question, my long preamble, so Nazanin is kind of as you might expect, really. I mean, we, as you said, Nazanin was arrested over 3 years ago now, was kept in solitary for 9 months, sentenced to secret trial, 5 years charges. She would have been eligible for parole after a third of that sentence was passed. So back in October 2017, she actually got eligible for parole. A second court case was opened against her to block that parole, essentially, and has been opened and closed, depending on the sort of political dynamics of diplomacy and so on. And as Ketty says, it was reopened again 2 days ago. It was reopened again 2 days ago. 2 weeks before that, Foreign Minister Zarif was in New York marketing Nazanin as part of a prisoner swap. And there's obviously an up and down immediate experience of that. And that's probably a fair reflection on what life is like for her, and that you have these moments of hope, and you get your hopes up and then you get dashed down. And it's one thing for me being outside of all that, able to campaign, able to reach out to people, to be lifted up by the kindness and care of the outside world. But for her, the ups you lift, but the downs come down. There is a very practiced part of the way in which the Iranian regime operates to control people by promising and taking away. There's threats and taking away, sometimes carrying out, but it's also the hope that can kill you. And it's a very, very sophisticated kind of manipulation. So she was all of a flutter when the prisoner swap was mentioned. I mean, not sure the British government was so keen on that particular suggestion, but all hopeful. And then obviously it was taken away very quickly. And the second court case came pretty tough, because what's going on there, that's clearly a signalling by the Iranian regime to say, listen, we're letting you know that we're not happy and that we want something, which periodically they've done, and they have always used Nazanin as a bargaining chip. and actually said to her face that, listen, there is no case. We're going to hold you because we want the British government to make the agreement. And at points, certainly the judge in charge of her second court case cried. And there are, the Iranian regime, like all regimes, is full of a variety of people, and there are some people that are appalled by what their job requires them to do. But his job was to make up a case and to not convict her, to take it to a certain point and just leave it hanging. In terms of what we have been doing in Canada, the important thing about Nazanin's story is she's not the only one. There are a number of foreign and dual nationals who are held in Iran, typically people with outside links. So they could be, environmentalists we've talked about, there are charity workers, some journalists, lots of academics, some people in IT, who can be framed as having some outside links to, I say fairly flippantly, MI6 or CIA or whatever it is the sort of enemy of choice, but who are held partly to, I think, send a warning to the Iranian diaspora outside that says, listen, we're still in charge here, and don't you come in with your funny foreign ideas. We're in control, and partly as leverage in a very straightforward way. And one of the things that has developed quite clearly, it's been latent to points, but again recently, is that there's a hostage industry in Iran, and there's a way in which the judicial system is an extension of the security services, and in some ways the TV is an extension of the security services, and will put out all sorts of fake propaganda, and is used as a business model. And there's, part of that can be internal. So I've seen people in the ward being shaken down because the family's quite rich, so they can pay bail to get out. And then, other governments are shaken down. It is, what we were saying to the Canadian Parliament is essentially this isn't just a pattern of sort of random cases. There is a form of diplomacy here. It's a form of hostage diplomacy. This is unacceptable. This needs to be, front and centre unacceptable. If you have an erosion of the norm of people can be taken and used as collateral, I would imagine Canada has got some sort of dispute with almost every state in the world. Most countries have got disputes and things they were getting on with and not getting on with, and all the baggage of history. There is a norm which says that we don't use our own citizens as collateral in that. One of the things we were talking about with the Foreign Affairs Committee, of course, is it's not just Iran. It's, principally Iran, but tit-for-tat arrests and being held for leverage, it happens in other authoritarian countries. Canada's got experience of China. Currently there are, other arrests that look, that's very scary. So what will we say? Well, it was partly to sort of say to the Foreign Affairs Committee, to say to all the different people we met, look, please recognise this issue. This is really important. This is not just important for Nazanin and the families involved. This is important for every Canadian Iranian, but actually for everyone that's a dual national that could be you have to be really clear on that. And you have to be really clear on this with all the like-minded states, whether it's the UK, the way I'll be pushing the Foreign Office, whether it's the US, whether, whatever that, actually that there are norms that we hold to, and there has to be an accountability, both at the UN, but also we were talking, and I would echo Masih that something called Magnitsky sanctions. So that's sort of not general sanctions on everyone, but those who are directly perpetrating outrageous human rights abuses should be targeted and should be sanctioned for it. That is the only way in which boundaries are put down, and the only way in which this practice will stop, because Nazanin and I were fairly normal people. We were not political when all this happened. And there is I think for many Iranians, you learn where the red lines are. You learn, okay, I'll be safe if I don't do this. And it was a huge surprise that actually none of that mattered. None of that mattered. It just, when she needed to be taken, she fitted the profile, and they took her. And it's a long journey back to get justice. I think the only other thing I'd add in my ramble is just to for all that, I think the importance of events like this, the events that, thank you to Professor Cutler for organising, thank you to Ketty for chairing it, thank you to all for coming. The importance of events like this for just keeping hold of a different idea that, you know, this is not normal, this should not happen, this is some kind of strange gaslighting, that the world should be different, and standing up for you know, normal principles and for justice, and you know, that shared world that we all believe in. We all knew when we were 6 how the world should be, with, you know, obviously more ice creams and bicycles. But I think it's yeah, a pleasure to be here, and thank you all for coming on.
Thank you so much, Richard. We're very grateful for your testimony, and this certainly isn't normal. It certainly isn't acceptable. I think that's the reason why we're all here today, and here in solidarity and in action as well, concrete action. That's what we want to come up with. And I think Nazanin's case also illustrates so well the political makeup of Iran today. The fact that the judiciary directly answers to serves the executive, and the fact that really the supreme leader appoints the judiciary, the government, and anyone in between. So I think that you're very right to put that in that context. That's not an isolated case. Maryam, I know you wanted to react quickly, and then we'll come to the audience. If there are questions and comments, we'll be happy to take them.
Sure. The first time I was called to trial, I just was 22 years old. The second time I was 25 years old, and I really felt loneliness. Even Judge Salavati, he is one of the 19 people who are gonna be under Magnitsky Act, was my judge, and he to sit behind me, to even you know, I wasn't able to see his face or his gesture. Maybe helpful for me. Now my lawyer is in prison too. But you know, it's a brutal circle. It should stop somewhere, and I guess we should support the next generation. I don't want next generation have the experience I had. Just because of that, I support Magnitsky and ask Canadian government to support Iranian people by put more pressure on officials, not ordinary people.
Thank you, Maryam, and thank you for reminding us of the legal avenues that we have in Canada to pursue this. And just a reminder, as Professor Kotler mentioned earlier, that Raoul Wallenberg has issued a list of perpetrators and people who are responsible, who are to be held responsible, and you can find it, you can access it on their website as well. So with that, I'd like to open open the floor for questions or comments. Please be brief, so that I'm sure everyone has a lot to share. If you're here, it's because you care about this issue, so I'm sure everyone has a lot to say. But kindly be brief, so that those who want to speak may all have an opportunity to do so. Do we have a mic? All right. You'll manage. Yeah. Okay.
Hi, my name is Avide Motmenfar. I'm the president of Council of Iranian Canadians and member of the Solidarity for Democratic Iran. We have come from Toronto to participate to this panel today and support. Thank you, Professor, for organizing this important event. As you all know, we have always been told by the lobbyists of the Islamic Republic that they would like to reopen the Iranian embassy here in Ottawa in order to have more conversation with the officials in Iran and hope to, to facilitate eventually the freedom to negotiate the freedom of dual nationals that are held in Iran. So my question would be for Mr. Ratcliffe. First of all, I'm so sorry for the imprisonment of your wife and the situation for your daughter. As a mother, I'm very empathic to their case. My question would be, to what extent you think that the British embassy in Tehran has been instrumental to help you to negotiate the freedom of Nazanin? And because we are really puzzled with the good relation and diplomatic ties that these two countries have with each other, while still your wife and your daughter are detained in Iran. Could you please tell us something about what is going on, and are you happy with the intervention, if any, of the British embassy? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a consideration that certainly say in Canada and then in the US case applies where there's no embassy. My sense in the big picture, looking at our case, looking at the European cases, looking at the American cases, that there are clear sort of particular tensions between different countries, which are problematic, but that I don't see, if I'm honest, that the UK's clearly worked hard at trying to improve its relationship with Iran. It's certainly, the embassy's worked quite hard on trying to, ask in a nice way to bring Nazanin home and work quite hard behind the scenes. And she's remained behind bars. And there's obviously, we were talking about one of the meetings, Iran's a complicated place in that different parts of the regime pull in different directions. There is a part that's tried to sort of improve relations, and there's a part that's tried to mark that they're in charge. And when the embassy got upgraded to full ambassador, that was when Nazanin got sentenced to 5 years. So there was a clear signalling, and the timing, and her being used as a signalling there. I've probably over time got more aggressive, and asked my government to get more aggressive, and to signal that, listen, this is unacceptable. I did not use the word hostage taking 2 years ago. Did not call for Magnitsky sanctions 2 years ago. It seems perfectly reasonable to ask nicely and to try and improve it, and then if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I think in terms of the big picture, obviously a number of the dual nationals, there was a wave of people taken just after the nuclear deal, and they were taken partly by the Revolutionary Guard out of concern of a thawing of relations and a losing of control. And obviously we're in a different moment politically. There's an odd shift in that now, Nazanin and the Americans and the Canadians, and to some extent the Europeans, it would seem, are more human shields, and that we were taken to stop relations improving, we're now held to stop them deteriorating too much. So it's quite plastic as to how you get used. The point we were making to the Canadian Foreign Ministry was that I think you need to be really clear that some things are unacceptable, and that hostage taking is wrong, and to signal absolutely that your priorities are to have your citizens safe. I think when you open an embassy, you have more routes for communication. You may not be making that message as clearly because it might be other conversations having about sort of trade deals and so we at points have been a bit critical of the, I have to say the day that the embassy got upgraded while Nazanin was, I was furious, outraged that it had happened. It certainly does allow for more communication. That hasn't worked so far. My sense is the Iranian regime is very sophisticated at playing poker with all of its counterparts. It uses people as part of that, and we would be able to release them if you don't upgrade them. It's tosh, you should release them because they're innocent. You don't need to have you don't need to get a reward for it. That was again a rather long answer. Sorry.
Thank you so much.
My name is Francis Yell. I'm president of South Sudan community here in Ottawa. I've been within Iran rally since 2006. I go to Europe, attend a conference, and also in the United States I went to, and also locally here. So many years, government of Canada is not taking actions by closing down the Iranian embassy here in Ottawa and try to call to protect the Canadian, to protect Canadian Iranian, and to protect also Iranian people who are suffering in jail. So I don't know when it's gonna be a change. And I think the strong message to be sent to the Iran is to Ottawa to close down the Iranian embassy here in Ottawa. And that is gonna be a strong message to the Iran, because Iran is not only threatening Iranian people, but within neighborhood, in the globe, in Middle East in general, Israel, Saudi Arabians, and also the country like Sudan's supporting terrorism, money laundering, and so on. There are a lot of things going on in Iran. And I'm here with Alex Neff, he's a General Secretary for Amnesty International. I don't know what they are doing in order to pressure, if there is no way for the government of Canada to do, they can be able to pressure the government of Canada in order to close down Iranian embassy here in Ottawa, and that will be a strong message. So after this panel speaker, what is a decision can be able to be taken so that we can be able to send a strong message to Iranian government at this time? Thank you.
Yeah, by sanction. Yeah. For okay. I guess for now, our goal is to take actions on Magnitsky sanction against the individual architects of human violation of human rights. The names that are in the list are the actual criminals in our courtrooms. They are the one who put human rights activists and their lawyers into prisons. They are the ones who give the good people of Iran long sentences. For me, the first step is to take action on this motion and put Magnitsky sanction first priority for Canadian government. And I hope the other countries follow the path of Canada after taking actions on Magnitsky sanctions and targeting these individuals.
Thank you. I think we can take one last question at the back. There's a question. All right, so you can. Let's do. If you're brief, we can do two.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mehdi Falahi, and I have a comment for the ladies Shaparak Shajarizadeh and Maryam Shafipour, and a question. First of all, I praise you for what you did in Iran, and you knew that you're subject to arrest, going to notorious Evin. You knew that you're subject to torture, and you knew that you are risking your whole life, and you still did it. And I really admire you and praise you. The future of Iran is built by people like you. Now, my question. My question is that when you were arrested, do you think those people who arrested you, who took you to prison or everything, do you think they really believed in what they were doing, or they were just doing because they were benefiting from that, because they were being paid? Did you see any belief in those damn people? Sorry, I'm apologizing for my word.
Just for me, it wasn't like they weren't normal human beings. And I didn't see any religious beliefs or any human feelings in them. It was just they were cruel people who were doing their jobs. Yeah, no. They don't believe in anything. I guess they don't even believe in what they were doing. It was just they are bad human people. Brainwashed. Yeah, brainwashed for their benefits. I didn't see brainwashed people. I saw the people who had benefits from what they were doing.
The last question, Deborah.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I think they believe in money, especially about new generation in IRGC. They just follow where money goes. I guess, Iranian government spend a lot of money to, to make people support them in Iran or outside of Iran. Money plays a crucial role.
You mean to prop up its legitimacy?
Yeah.
Ketty, which was the last question you want to take?
There's a last question at the back. And you can use it when you're answering to make your closing comments.
According to my information from BBC, Nazanin Zaghari has been convicted to 38 years in prison and 148 lashes. I mean, are they going to do that, or? Especially the lashes.
Yeah. Talking about Nazanin is always hard for me. The first time I saw her, it was 2 weeks before I got arrested because I was threatened massively in social media. I went to see Nazanin, and she was always been my role model. From her previous time in prison, I used to follow her, and she told me that your cause is my cause, and you have all my support. And even though they didn't let her to see, they didn't let me see her or contacted her during the time I was in prison, both time. Even though I wasn't able to, as Maryam said, even in the courtroom during the trial, they couldn't let us talk to each other. And for me, she was talking to me with eye contact. That was it. But she did everything to put me out of prison. And now I'm here. Nazanin is in jail, facing 38 years. I don't know if they're gonna do that. I hope we don't let them do that and raise awareness. And for the lashes, I don't know, it's 21st century, and countries like Iran, Saudi Arabia, or some other Muslim countries, they still give people, I'm not talking about activists, human rights activists, I'm talking even about normal people. As Iranian know, we have lots of relatives who got lashes for what? For drinking alcohol in the parties. For partying, they got lashes. This is 21st century, and this is barbaric, and the world still keeps silence about these kind of sentences. Raif Badawi is facing, he has 1,000 lashes, and he got just 50 of them, and he still has 950 lashes. Can you believe it? And he's still in recovery for the first 51. This is outrageous. And my lawyer, Nasrin, got 74 of the lashes for my case because they accused her of spreading lies about my case. No, she didn't tell any lie. Those things actually happened during my interrogation. I was beaten up badly. My face was in bruises. And the only things she could do was telling public about the things that had happened to me inside courtrooms and inside prison. And the first time I was arrested, I was in solitary confinement for 1 week. And I was on hunger strike. After 1 day, I realized I couldn't do anything. They wouldn't even give me one paper to read because I couldn't sleep. I had panic attacks. So I started hunger strike. And the only thing she did was telling public about my situation. And she got 20 years and 74 lashes for telling people about my case, also Maryam Shariat-Madari's case. And the thing that she said about Maryam was right, and everybody witnessed, because an officer threw Maryam down that utility box, and she got injured. And Nasrin told public that they are beating up the women activists. And can you believe it? For telling people about the situation of your clients, she got 20 years and 74 lashes. And I guess the human rights organization, we have to do something about the sentences of lashes and take action for these countries and for the judges who give these sentences. So, how?
This is the real question.
How?
We're sitting here, okay, watching, talking about these huge topics, okay, but the thing is that how we can protect such good lawyers and human activists who are suffering from hunger, from these things in Iranian prison. This is the thing. Do you think that putting more sanctions on the regime can take these lawyers out of the prison? Can help us help them? No, of course not.
We are not talking about sanctioning regime.
Of course. You know, the thing is that we've got lots of countries like Canada, like England, like America, okay? They are even like Trump, the big Trump, okay? They always protect the activists in Iran. But the thing is that we actually see nothing to help them. That's a great move here. We are all here to make sure that we are part of these movements. But the thing is that how we really can help Nazanin, how we can help Yasaman, how we can help Bulgan Keshavars, how we can help them just to get out of the prison, not just get out of Iran, okay? Because this is our country.
Yeah, thank you for your question and your comment, and I think that's the challenge that is being posed upon us by the panelists here. I'm sorry, we can't take any more questions. We can continue discussing this. I know it's a hot topic. We can continue discussing this right after the panel, but this is precisely the challenge that we're faced with, and we must find that solution together. I don't think one has the answers. We have, our panelists have been here to share what the experience and what the realities are in Iran. And we have instruments. We have, Canada as a country is recognized for its record on human rights and for standing for human rights. So we have a lot of experts, and there must be ways and solutions to be found, yes, and we must certainly continue doing that until we do. I'm going to ask Maryam to comment very, very quickly and close, just maybe 1 minute, and what perhaps if you have a specific call, and then Richard as well.
Maybe my answer will be useful for you. As I experience, Iranian government is very sensitive and cares about public opinion. Because of that, they spend a lot of money to whitewash their bloody hands. Yes, sanctions are useful. I just want to mention something. Iranian government caused a lot of dark holes in regions, in Afghanistan, in Syria, in Iraq, and train and give some terrorists weapons, just to murder people in region. Put sanction on IRGC, on Iranian Islamic Republic's broadcast, or Statad Farman Ijraiye Imam, something like that. It's very useful because they follow their benefits. It's more useful than prevent, for example, the government sell their oils because their own benefits. If they can't spend money, nobody follow them. It's a real story of them.
I mean, it's a really big question, what works. I think for me, the thing I'd say, and it's kind of an odd thing to say, is I'd emphasize, and this is coming as an outsider to sort of Iranian activism and the dynamics, the importance of solidarity and the importance of trust. We as families of dual nationals have to work quite hard to build the trust, to sort of share our stories together, to feel that, I don't want to be dangerously associated with that person, I don't know about that case, and just to accept that, we're all victims of the same horrible process. There are different quirks, there are, some people that are, and that kind of stepping away from the sort of, I want to be the good prisoner that cuts the special deal, and just, being in solidarity with each other. The thing, I suppose, on a very personal level, we have a petition, which many of you may have signed. It's on change.org, which has now got 2.2 million signatures. And every so often I'll do an update on that petition. The importance of people leaving messages of solidarity, of hope, of care, of just humanly reaching out. Really important for me, but also important for Nazanin. A, to know it's there, but to know that one day she can come out and see all those people cared. And all those people still care, and they care for Nasreen, and they care for Nargis, and they care for all the other prisoners. And that ability to care and to keep caring and to come to events like that, and there is a frustration as to what works instrumentally, and it's certainly true that, it's good to bash the governments and to push them to do more and to say, listen, that's rhetoric, and where's the substance, and that's what we were doing today. But also just that sort of being here, standing up and being counted, and just saying, I see you going through, and it's not okay. It's really important. So thank you all for coming.
No, I'm sorry. We can do this right after. You can share your thoughts right after. Okay. Thank you. Just please join me in thanking our panelists, Richard, Maryam, and Shaparak. We are deeply grateful deeply humbled and deeply strengthened by your testimonies and the challenge that you pose upon us to find a solution. I was certainly very honored to have shared this conversation with you. And I'll pass the microphone now over to Professor Kotler for closing comments.
I just want to join Eddie in thanking the panelists for really their, not only their compelling testimony, but we have to appreciate, you know, the pain that underpins their experience. It's not easy to share these stories, let alone to have to endure those experiences. And I think the message that Richard concluded the panel now of the importance of solidarity, the importance of letting the Iranian political prisoners know that they are not alone, that we will be relentless in our advocacy until we secure their release. That's a very important message on a very deep personal and psychological and moral level, as well as the Magnitsky sanctions would be on a juridical level. If a judge who sentences Nazanin Zaghari to prison will know that he may be targeted with these sanctions, he may think about whether he should be sentencing Nazanin Zaghari to prison. If the prosecutor in the case knows that he may, in other words, Magnitsky sanctions can not only hold those involved in these human rights violations accountable, it can help deter others from engaging in similar violations. We have to make the question, when I say we, the government, the parliament, civil society, have to make the question of the protection of human rights in Iran a priority on our justice agenda and our foreign policy agenda as a matter of principle and as a matter of policy in everything that we do. That we have to mainstream this issue, and we have to internationalize the advocacy on this issue. And if we do that, if we mobilize an international community of conscience and action, then we will bring about the releases of the Nazanin Zaghari, and we will help with the courageous people of Iran to bring about freedom and democracy for the Iranian people. Thank you.